Hi, I'm John Daschbach, the director of Come Back Anytime, and you're listening to Contrazoom.
This is ContraZoom, where we go back and forth about film. I'm Dakota Arsenault. Back on episode 151, Hot Docs 2021, Rachel and I discussed a documentary called Come Back Anytime. We both fell in love with the gentle ramen documentary that we wrote separate reviews of the film. We had hoped to get an interview with the director John Daschbach last year, but the timing wasn't right. Luckily, he's back doing press again, and while Rachel had the opportunity to interview him for POV Magazine, which I'll link to in the show notes, I got the chance to chat with him for the podcast. Also, a bit of housekeeping, I want to announce that ContraZoom has started a coffee account, where if you like what we are doing, you can leave us a tip to help us cover costs of producing the podcast and keep us going. You can find a link in the show notes or on the homepage at contrazoompod.com. Let's now get to my chat with John Daschbach.
食べに来たらマスターから今度こうするんだけどって言われて、あ、じゃあ行く行くみたいな。
I would now like to welcome to the show John Daschbach, the American director who is based out of Japan, who made the excellent ramen documentary Come Back Anytime. His film premiered at last year's Hot Docs Festival, where Rachel and I were lucky enough to see it. And this film follows Masimoto and his wife for a year as they run their ramen shop. Masimoto isn't about to earn a Michelin star and he isn't being foreclosed on. The film is just a laid-back journey about what it means to be really, really good at the job you love. Welcome, John. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to finally speak with you.
Absolutely. Now, like I said, I caught this last year at Hot Docs when it premiered, instantly just fell in love with this movie, and I feel like the other people that I've talked to have seen it also sort of feel the same way. It's just such a warm and inviting movie, and it's almost like the tone matches the subject matter, and so I'm glad I can finally ask you some questions about this film.
I'm glad to hear that, because that was definitely the overall goal of my goal of making the film, was to try to capture and recreate the essence of that place, the feeling of that place that I had when I was there. Because it's a film. We can't provide the taste of the ramen, but I thought maybe if I could provide everything else that surrounds it, that you get a sense of what a warm and welcoming and just fun and comfortable place it is.
I will say your film is almost a little bit cruel because you cannot actually taste the ramen. The two times I've watched this movie, I'm pretty sure both times that evening I ordered ramen for dinner.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. We're trying to channel that into some partnerships with ramen restaurants all over the world, and having special screenings and that kind of thing. And we've had some of those, and people are happy to be able to do that, to have some ramen right afterwards. But I definitely recommend that for anybody who's going to watch it. I'm told that you should be prepared. And I'm glad to hear that, because that means we succeeded in some way.
Mm-hmm. So my first question is, how did you actually end up discovering Bizentai, the ramen shop that's featured in this movie?
So I first went to Bizentai almost 10 years ago now. It was through a friend who worked in the neighborhood, a Japanese friend, a friend of my producer, who actually just called us and said, "Hey, we're going to go mountain yam foraging up in Niigata in the mountains this weekend with my local ramen master, or my lunchtime ramen master. Are you guys interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, I don't know what that is, but that sounds amazing." And so my introduction was actually in the context of that expedition up north, and he said, "Well, just come by, a couple nights before we go, and just to meet the master." And so that was the first time I went, and I fell love with the ramen instantly. But it was sort of a unique way to meet the place, and as the film tries to convey, or as it was important to me to include these weekend excursions because they're such a part of the community that he's built there. That he's the kind of guy who, despite working on his feet 5 days a week, it's a business district, so he's closed on the weekends because there's just not that much. He's really catering more to the lunchtime and then after work crowd in Iidabashi, the area of Tokyo, and so he can't sit still on the weekends, and I wanted to make sure I captured that. And he's always just off doing something fun, often food related, but not always. But we tried to sort of channel it and focus it into food related stuff. So
that makes sense.
So that was how I met him, and then over the next several years, I was invited to other things, fishing, flounder fishing, and off the coast of Chiba, and he has this kind of country garden plot that's in the film that he grows his own. He has like this little mini organic garden that is just a passion project for him, and he built his own pizza oven there, and so he has these pizza parties that he invites everybody from the restaurant out to an hour and a half out to the country for pizza parties. And it's kind of bring your own, and somebody provides all the dough, and everybody else brings toppings, and it's just a wonderful time for those. So we did those, and yeah, it's just after a couple of years of this. I just thought I want to try to capture this place because it's so unique, and I realized that he's kind of the anchor of the whole community, and he's built it, and it's formed around him. So I just thought, what if I could try to sort of capture this in a film?
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. Do you have a go-to meal when you're eating at the shop?
I do. Mine is the classic, the chashu ramen. So it's his Tokyo style soy based ramen that is his sort of signature with extra chashu, because I like the chashu so much. It's a really unique chashu, which the film goes into a little bit. It gets a little bit sort of food wonky about what makes it unique in terms of. It's different than typical chashu because he's as he explains, he didn't really like the typical chashu, and he was like, well, if I'm going to serve ramen, I guess I have to figure out one that I like. So he kind of created his own variation that's really interesting. But it's people come over the holidays particularly to get just the takeout packet of it, because he closes for around 10 days, like a lot of restaurants do over the holidays, or New Year holidays. And so, it's a popular takeout item as well.
Now, is it the sort of thing where, as we see in the movie with certain customers, where the first thing they order, that's what they get every time because he just serves it to them and you weren't able to try anything else?
No. I mean, it's funny because there is that anecdote. There was this one customer who says that. He's just like, well, that's what he ordered today. And that's what I've had ever since. No, especially since I made the film, I think at some point, and a lot of people do this, they do want to try everything, but they eventually kind of settle on their favorite. But he doesn't have that many. I mean, he's got a salt-based one, a miso-based one that's a little bit spicy and kind of a unique miso. Again, he wanted to have his own spin on it. And the salt-based one features onions, spring onions. So it's actually called like onion ramen, not salt ramen. But that's about it. I mean, then lots of toppings. So there's a couple varieties. But I've definitely tried them all. But I always kind of revert back to the essential soy-based. I get the soup is really interesting because it incorporates the chashu pork that is cooked initially in the soup, and that helps create the soup along with bones and other things, and then he transfers that to this soy braise for a couple hours, and then he lets the chashu cool, and then the braise becomes the tare which combines with the soup, and so the sort of pork is like in all of it in this really interesting way. It's just really unique. So it's hard not to have that one every time.
That sounds incredible. Now, Masimoto goes by a few names in the movie, his real name, but he also is known by Master or Taisho. And Taisho, if I understand correctly, is a nickname that means big or important, but it's typically reserved for an older generation than even Masimoto is from. What do you call him, and what does what you call him refer to your relationship to him?
It's a good question. I mean, it's funny because my producer who's Japanese is like, this is, because I included this discussion of like, some people call him Taisho, some people call him master, and why is that? And because I remember early on or somewhere in my own process, that was one of the conversations we had at the place. And so I thought, well, this is the kind of conversation you have here. Like, well, what does that mean? And what's funny is I got a lot of different answers. So there isn't really one answer. But I think, master is what, as one person explains, like reserved for a certain kind of relationship, and Taisho for another. So it depends on the age difference and just what naturally feels natural to the person, but also then it indicates like how long have they known them, so how young were they when they started, because you're not going to change it as the age difference changes. It's not going to like, okay, now I have to call him. It's just so it's a very interesting thing. I call him master, or when I'm talking about him, not addressing him, I'll call him Ueda-san, which is his last name. But typically, if I'm just sort of saying, hey, master, that's what I'll use. And I think that's probably what most people use. But some people like Taisho, which is also, I think, translates sort of to general or leader. So he's always the leader on these excursions. So it's sort of fitting for that too. Some people who are far more advanced in Japanese than I am will probably listen to this and say, no, that's all wrong. But I think it's open to a lot of interpretation.
All right. Well, that sounds good to me. The ROM in the film is described by a customer as subtle and gentle. And I have to ask if that was one of the keys for you in deciding how to shoot and edit the film. It is a warm and fuzzy documentary that makes you feel good while nourishing you, much like a bowl of delicious ramen does.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that was the goal, but I didn't know whether that was possible. But it was definitely something I was conscious of. I think it was probably more subconscious at first, because it emerged as like, oh, actually, you know what, this film could sort of be a metaphor, for the soup itself, in terms of nourishing, and that emerged. I think sort of grew up into my consciousness as I was editing it. But my goal when editing it, sort of my litmus test was, does this, because we shot way more than we need, as many documentaries do. But in my case, I have made fiction before, but I never made a documentary. And I also this story, I didn't know what the story was, or, it was just a place. I wanted to capture a place. So I didn't really have a script or anything, which some documentaries, depending on the subject, it makes sense to have, kind of a working script. But I just said, let's just make it a process of discovery. So we just shot as much as we could, and we asked him for a year's worth of access and patience with us, and he said sure. And so I think what emerged was, okay, well, what I could try to do is just capture the essence and the feeling of this place through the course of a year. And since we had filmed for a year, I thought, okay, that's a good way to structure it. And if people come away feeling like they've been there, then, or they want to go there, or they know a place like that, and it reminds them in a warm, way of their own version of that, then that's the best we could hope for.
Interesting. So. What was your sort of shooting schedule like? Because I imagine, like, if you're filming him make the broth, you watch him do that a few times. It's not like he's really changing his process up. So how are you deciding what and when to shoot?
We asked early on. We just thought, I knew that I wanted to get the people and the place, but I didn't know if I wanted to wait until they were more familiar with us, and he was, to get into some of the interviews and stuff like that. So we decided to sort of push all that, and start just with the food, because it's more technical, and you don't have to know him to be able to get really in close with the food. So we did spend so we started really by spending a good 2 solid days in the restaurant with him from before he got there. Well, we kept trying to get there before he would, but he would always arrive earlier because he didn't want to be late. So we had to start lying about when we were coming, and then we would come early, because I wanted to get him the opening of the whole place and everything, and the first time we arrived, he was already there working. We were like, wait, we haven't. So we spent kind of 2 whole days which was a lesson in how hard he works to do this right off the bat. Is 2 long days with his whole prepper team. He gets there at like 8 in the morning and starts cooking, and so we did a lot of that, and then over the course of the next few months, we would go on these weekend excursions, and then it started naturally making sense to film on the Monday after a weekend excursion. Even though we were pretty exhausted, we knew we had to make the effort to go in on Monday, because that's when he would serve a lot of the fruits of his efforts of the weekends, whether it was foraging or hunting or fishing. And so that kind of became a pattern as well. And then we had a couple several times where we just said, okay, let's just hang out at night and really get to know the regulars and capture them. And then sort of process wise, it was just a matter of, okay, I'm just going to shoot people tonight. Or I'm just going to shoot him making food. Because that took me a while to realize, like I was, the first few times I was a little distracted, and I kept trying to, he's pouring some ramen, so I'll go shoot that. Somebody's talking, so I'll go shoot that. And I was like, just keep coming back and just keep doing it. I mean, what's great about the nature of it is that, it was all, there's no space for more than one camera. I mean, that's partly why I shot it myself. I mean, I just thought it'd be fun creatively as a challenge, but also, there wasn't room for anybody more than me and my producer, who was there kind of in the background helping as a waiter half the time. And just with a boom mic on the camera, and that's how we shot most of it. But the nature of the subject matter is such that it's repetitive. So it actually was really convenient from a craft, not to get too far into the technical side, but shooting with a single camera, it was great to have this repetitive action. He's making the same exact kind of bowl in the same way every time, and so sort of coverage wise, I could shoot that many different nights and from many different angles. And ultimately, I could use it as if it was a multi-camera shot of the same process. So there's a lot of that, a lot of just repetitive action, and I just sort of at some point started making a list and making sure I had gotten everything that I thought I might need. But I mean, the good thing about the relationship we have with him and him still being open, at least pre-COVID, was I was able to sort of go back in and go, okay, I need a few of these, and need a few of these inserts, and stuff I hadn't got. I realized, oh my gosh, I never shot the gyoza thing opening, or so it was the nature of the subject matter was amenable to that. Does that make sense?
Well, I appreciate the technical insight, because I do find that very fascinating. I would describe this film as being low stakes, unassuming, and quaint. And I don't mean any of that as an insult. In fact, it's refreshing and unique that such a film exists. What are some of your inspirations as a director that may have influenced your work that has such a comforting feel to it?
That's a good question. I mean, I really, some of the documentaries I like are actually from fiction filmmakers. So, I mean, I'm not an expert in as I said, it's my first documentary. So I think maybe intuitively I took some inspiration from like Kiarostami, who's one of my favorites, and some of the documentary stuff he's done, or Kieslowski started in documentaries. So I've seen several of his, but it's always difficult for me to talk about influences because I'm not really conscious of them, I think. But I think I just, again, I thought, okay, if I'm going to make a documentary, let me just try to observe. So I did think about like, okay, what kind of documentary is this? An observational documentary? But at a certain point, I did want the voices of the regulars as well. And so I thought, okay, we should have some sort of, authorities, and they're the authorities, or maybe there's a sort of Greek chorus, but I wanted to talk to as many of them as possible. And we asked them all the same questions so that we could kind of get a series of multiple answers to the same questions about the place. And that helped. So it sort of emerged formally, I think, in that way, just organically.
Speaking of the guests, one of them, travels around Japan for working, and he's tasted so many restaurants' ramen that he was able to write his own guide for it, and yet felt so strongly about this shop that he featured it prominently with a picture of himself and master. After your documentary has come out, has that changed the patronage at all for the shop? Because I know if I ever find myself in Japan, I'll be going there for sure.
I mean, it's funny because, first of all, it hasn't shown in Japan yet, which is
really? Oh my gosh.
ridiculous. Yeah, we keep trying to find a distributor who wants it, so that says something, I think, about the nature of it. I mean, it's also because we consciously decided that it was probably the kind of film that might do better abroad, just because it's my perspective somewhat as like, here's my experience as a foreigner, and look what I found, kind of, let me show you what I found here in Japan that's a little bit different than what you might have seen. That was also a conscious goal. That here's a chef who's not completely, as you said, he's not chasing Michelin stars, and he kind of busts some cliches, I think. So it hasn't shown in Japan. So it hasn't really. Well, we had a screening for the master and his regulars and friends, a private one. But so that's still to come, and it might. I mean, I suppose it might actually. We're hoping it would, but I think maybe a Japanese audience, and maybe this is why we haven't been able to yet attract a Japanese distributor, is that it doesn't seem as unique to them, because there are, but that's sort of the point too. It's like there are a lot of places like this. Here's this one, and here's how this one is unique. But I mean, and then there's the other factor of COVID. So I think last week they announced that they're finally relaxing some of the entry restrictions for Japan. So we don't really know yet sort of what influence it's had, other than that he's had a few people. So it showed in Australia, and so people who are connected and coming professionally, or not just on tourist visas. There's barely any tourism still. That's going to change, we hope, this fall and winter. But so it showed theatrically in Taiwan, and there was a Taiwanese student who came because his parents saw it and they told him he had to go, and there was like somebody from Norway who again, it's on like video on demand in Norway, and so some Norwegian who was based in Tokyo came. So it's been sort of limited to that, but it is bringing in some people who, I think somebody saw it on an airplane and decided to come and visit, and the Taiwanese student actually came back with a care package from his mother that she had sent, and she said, and here, this is for the master. So we kind of love that now there's like food is traveling across borders, and we've made these connections between Taiwan and people in Taiwan and the master. He loves that, and he loves just having people come in and finding out that they're there because they saw it.
Well, good. I'm glad he's appreciating his newfound fame then.
Yeah, I mean, he's happy for us too, because as filmmakers, he just wants to support it in any way he can, and it's just all kind of icing on the cake of a long, very successful career that he's enjoyed, and this is just kind of this unexpected little coda, I think, for him. I mean, he's not talking about retiring yet, but I mean, he's 70, so it's inevitable that and that's addressed in the film as well, as sort of deciding when to call it quits. But we hope, and as do the regulars, we hope he'll keep at it for a while, particularly so he can enjoy, I think, meeting more people from around the world who have seen it once they finally can come. So I'm glad to hear that you want to come. Well, please let us know. We'll take you there personally.
Absolutely. You made a good transition for me there, because towards the end of the movie, you start asking the customers and master how they feel about when the shop will eventually close. Was this in response to something that was said off camera, prompting you to see if master has plans of retiring anytime soon, or is it just a natural question to ask?
I think for me, it was just, I knew this was a subject matter. I was really interested to hear how the extras, I mean, the regulars, felt about that, because it was such an important part of their lives, and it is, kind of it's in the air as a question, because he's like I said, he's 70. I mean, he was not quite at the time we filmed, but inevitable question. So yeah, it was more that. It wasn't like, oh, there's a rumor he's going to close. It was more, how long are you going to keep doing this? Because he's at the end, toward the end of this 40-year career. So yeah, so to me, it just seemed like an important question that's in the air and in the back of everybody's mind, I think. So I wanted to know what the regulars thought about that.
Interesting. Okay. Food for me especially is always an exciting documentary subject matter, as the best ones really make viewers' mouths water. We can go back to sort of the technical aspects of making a film. What were sort of your secrets of getting great shots of food, specifically how beautiful the ramen is photographed in the movie?
Well, thank you. I'm glad to hear you like that. That was a real point of uncertainty for me because I'd never done it before. But the one approach I took, so a couple things is I did use slow motion a lot because, you know, not because I wanted to create these like sort of food porn sequences, but just because it gives you a little more control. I knew it would give me more control later on. Because you can always speed it up again, you know. Mm-hmm. So, and so it just gives you the chance, and I knew that the steam would look really great in slow motion and that kind of thing. So, the other thing I decided, getting back to what I was saying about the sort of repetitive nature of the particularly with this dish, is that he's just making the same thing over and over again in the same way. So I just, like I said, I chose some times where I would just focus on this, you know, let's just get him pouring bowls, let's just get him lifting noodles, and then I also thought it was important to shoot it, again, not to get too technical, but with a kind of shallow depth of field that feels cinematic, you know, intuitively, I think, to a lot of viewers, and you know, I also was conscious of trying to get as many different angles as I could, although that was a little challenging because the space is so small. But I did manage to do that without breaking anything, which the producer was really worried about, because I'm not a small person, and so it was a challenge. But he also, it was a testament to his patience too. I was constantly in his way because I was sharing this space that he doesn't usually share with anybody, and I was right, you know, in there, and he would just kind of signal to me, like non-verbally, like, okay, I need to go this way. So, and I would just kind of get out of the way. But I guess I knew that I just needed a lot of coverage and inserts as an editor, because I hadn't really shot anything myself, but I've edited a lot of films, and I just knew that the coverage, you know, and close-ups and inserts are essential, and you can kind of do anything you want. So the food is all a year's worth of that kind of stuff, shot at many different times, but because it's all the same action, you can really combine it into one moment.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. The film features a score by Michael Shaib, I hope I said his name correctly, who performs who performs covers of classical and jazz standards as well as his own compositions. The jaunty and upbeat nature works perfectly with the images on screen. How did your partnership work?
That was really fun. I mean, and we've worked together on. He's done 2 of previous films for me, but that's a little different because they were fiction. This one, the process really was, I started by just kind of finding stuff that I thought would work, and a lot of it was pre-existing classical music, and then he's a classically trained pianist, so he recorded all of the classical pieces that we used, Brahms and Mendelssohn and Debussy, that I had various versions of, but we sort of wanted it to have all a cohesive sound, you know, that was from him and his piano and his style of playing. And then there were several moments in the film where I just knew that we needed original score, and so he composed all that as well. And really the last 15 minutes of the film is just all his score, just original score. But it you know, it's recorded. His producer, Brent Lord, also, you know, did a great job, I think, of just creating this cohesive sound that ties everything together. And then there is some jazz that we licensed, and then there's some jazz by this performer named Eugen Cicero, who was big in the sort of 60s and 70s as kind of jazzy classical, like he would do classical pieces in a jazz style. And so I started thinking about, like, okay, let's sort of think about jazz in the restaurant and classical outside the restaurant, and just to sort of create just a subconscious anchoring points for the audience to sort of just intuitively kind of sense where they are in the overall structure of the film and patterns of the film. So there was a point where Mike and I started talking about doing his own version of that. So we found this Mozart piece we liked, and he created this sort of jazz-inspired adaptation of the Mozart piece. So it's a combination of many things. And then, like I said, there's a few just straight jazz recordings by other artists that we licensed as well. some people, a few people have complained that there's too much music, but I'm used to be a musician, and I mean, I still am just for fun. But I think it's very important to me, and it's just somehow this movie, there isn't actually music in his restaurant, but there is in a lot of restaurants, and so I sort of took the liberty there, I think, of it just, and there's jazz in a lot of places in Tokyo, and so that was kind of my I took the liberty of creating this background soundtrack for the place that I felt like kind of evokes the feeling of my feeling of what it's like to be there, and just it just feels like jazz to me. So that's why we did that. But that was our process of working, and I, Mike's original compositions, I barely had any notes because I was just thrilled with what he did, and I think by that point he knew the context that it was going to sit in with all the other pre-existing classical and jazz pieces that we had, so he knew how to kind of just tie it in perfectly and make it feel really natural. But the last like I said, 15 minutes where it really kind of reaches an emotional peak is heavily supported by his score, I think, for sure.
Well, it's a fantastic score, and it works perfectly with the movie. I'm so happy with it. John, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I know the film will be getting a VOD release next year in Canada, and there will be a broadcast of the movie on TVO for Ontario residents in November. But what comes next for you?
We're still self-distributing in the U.S., so that's taking a lot of our time. Somewhat just as control freaks, we just decided there wasn't anybody that we were ready to hand it over to in the U.S. Or the deals just weren't right. So we've decided to just give that a try, and that's partly because the next project I think that I want to do is also it's going to take some time to even start getting access. It involves I'll just say scuba diving and ancient mysteries, and it's in Japan. Okay. And it's a subject I've been very fascinated with for a long time, but it's going to take quite a while to figure out how to do it and to get the right access and meet the right people. So we're just starting that process in the meantime, while we're still working with a co-producer in the U.S. to do this sort of self-distribution with events, like I said, with ramen places and stuff like that. So.
Well, that's very exciting, and I hope I can talk to you about that when that eventually comes out down the line.
Oh, great. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to thank John for coming on today's show to talk about Come Back Anytime. I'll make sure to share on social media any updates I have for people to watch the film. You can follow the show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at contrazoompod. If you've seen Come Back Anytime, let us know your thoughts. Send an email to contrazoompod@gmail.com. Thank you to Eric and Kevin Smale for the theme music, and to Stephanie Pryor for the logo design. If you like to listen to podcasts on YouTube, we do post all episodes there as well. Thanks for checking us out.